There we go. Okay.
Yeah, get it right there. Yeah, bye-bye.
Okay, we are now recording. So we have it. Welcome to the October 2021 virtual calendar or Camera Club of Brevard. And we've got a number of things on here. We're going to talk a little bit about Chuck's virtual photo walk. We're going to look at the patterns that were a big part of this past month, and October is silhouette. We're going to have a monthly competition review, thinking about topics as you go, because we're at about the point where we have to start thinking about next year's topic list. So if anybody has any good ideas, please send an email to us. And it's info@ccbrevard.org, and it will get here. Talk a little bit about some of the stuff coming down the pike, some competition updates. And then tonight's feature presenter is going to be Nick Stover, and he's going to talk about evaluating and working with light in photography. So we'll get that done. This is some of the highlights from our patterns virtual photo walk. And it's amazing how many patterns you see that are out there nearly every day. Chuck always has a great way to bring a topic in for people to capture.
Why would you let me work? I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, but you're not muted.
I know it. There it goes.
Okay.
No, a bunch of oohs and ahs there.
Oohs and ahs. All right, October's virtual photo walk challenge is silhouette. The first challenge in the October silhouette virtual photo walk is learning how to spell silhouette 3 out of 5 times correctly.
Yeah.
I was not able to do that, so I had to go back and do cut and paste pretty continuously. So anyway, use of silhouettes, as Chuck says here, makes dramatic photographs. And we've already got a number of folks who have submitted silhouettes to the Instagram. So keep your eyes open for those silhouettes, and grab one from time to time and load them up onto Instagram with the hashtag CCB Silhouette 2021. Or if you don't have Instagram, just send it in to info@ccbrevard.com and we will put it in. And you may very well make next month's highlight reel.
If anybody doesn't know how to create one, there is an article in the October F-Stop on the emphasizing subject articles that talks about how to create it, how to adjust your camera for silhouettes.
Very timely, Richard. Thank you. So 2021 tonight is open and creative. November is reflection, and then we have our annual photo competition, where you can submit up to 2 pictures in your category, whether that's A or B, and 2 pictures in creative. So potentially 4 pictures.
One picture in A or B.
I'm sorry?
One picture in A or B.
Is that a change?
No. 2 creative and 1 regular class.
Not for APC.
Oh, APC. I'm sorry.
Yep, APC, 2 and 2.
Isn't it 2 color and 2 black and
And
white?
2 black and white.
Yeah.
That might be it. That
Four.
might be it, Ann.
That's what threw me off.
So you mean opening creative class? Is it like the same as, you know, taking pictures of any subject from open? Like an animal or a
Yes,
landscape or a person?
any subject you want.
It's an open theme.
Correct.
Okay.
So, and coming up in 2022, we have seasons and weather in January, nighttime in February, and March we have perspective. And so April will be open and creative, just like every 4th month. So starting in May, we need the new categories. So starting in May, we'll need some new categories. So that's what we have to start thinking about. From the competition director, October's competition theme is open, 2nd category of creative. And Pat, I'm not going to steal your thunder. Are you on?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Do you have anything you want to add to this, Pat?
Well, I'd like to say that it seems like everybody's submitting their photos at the very last minute. I don't like it because I also have a lot of things to do. And, yeah, besides competition and, making the deadline to the last minute is not really that great. They've had weeks to prepare and submit their images. I'd like to really emphasize that they submit it fairly, in advance of midnight hour,
That's a good point, Pat. If you know what picture you're going to enter and it's 4 or 5, 6 days out, go ahead and send it in. There's no too early to send it in.
Right.
So and help Pat out a little bit as she juggles. She's a volunteer like everybody, and so as she juggles her schedule, it sure helps out if you can get your picture in.
Yeah, because I'm leaving for a trip on Friday, so I'm really pushing. And last night I was up until like 11:30 receiving photos, and up to when I sat down here, people were still sending in images. I'm still having, a problem with their sizing and stuff like that. So by now they should all have the sizing down. It's been a lot better, like 98%. There's still 2% out there are not paying attention. So I would appreciate if we emphasize time, correct sizing, and naming your photos.
That's a great point. 2,000 pixels on the long edge is
Right.
the size limitation. So everybody needs to remember that. So new members and guests, chime in and let us know if you are here. Who's here that's new or a guest?
Nobody?
I guess nobody.
I guess I had invited Andy.
Andy, are you up? Okay.
It's not.
He'll be joining us halfway through the presentation, I guess. Okay, competition help documents are available, and don't forget that cameraclubbrevard.org/articles or just cameraclubbrevard.org will get you to our website, and there's lots of good information you can steal from there. So don't hesitate to jump in to the website if you need a reminder on things. This is another one of my outings I got coming up, so pay attention here if you'd like. We always see after launches the streak shots that are out there of the rocket going up at nighttime or near night. And now's your chance. What I'm going to do is I am going to, on October 16th at 5:34 in the morning, an Atlas V rocket will launch just before dawn and present a great streak shot opportunity. Half the battle in streak shots is getting foreground interest. And if you see the picture on the upper right there, that's a SpaceX shot, and you see the streak going up. And where it changes from yellow to white, that is MECO, main engine cutoff. Then you see the little barb that goes up, and it's the little white barb going up. That is the booster doing the boost back burn to come home. Then you go to the right and you see the orange streak about 2/3 of the way up. That's the reentry burn. And if you look just to the left of that cabin cruiser, you see another yellow streak. That is the landing burn over there on pad 13.
Wow.
So in one camera setup, I got all the burns. I got a complete mission profile, and it really does make it when you have foreground interest. If that was just a black background with a bunch of streaks in it, you can do that with Photoshop. What you want to do is you want to have some foreground interest and interest in your picture, and that's where the planning comes in. So what I plan on doing is on the launch is the 16th, and it's at 5:34 in the morning. And what I'm going to do is hold a Zoom session on Thursday night, the 14th, and I'm going to cover the details of what to bring, where we're going to go, when to arrive with enough time to set up and so on. And after the launch, I plan on having a Zoom session where I will post-process my images, and you can kind of follow along and see what I do and what makes an image or how to post-process an image to make it look like either one of these two that I have. So if you are interested, take a look at that URL at the bottom, that email, ghe.air2air@gmail.com. And I'll leave that up there for a second. If you think you want to come to this, again, it's the 16th. Please email me. And right now I am planning on doing it at Cocoa Village. Everybody, I think, Cocoa Village is close enough to the center of the county that it's not unbearable drive for any one group. So I plan on doing it from there. That'll give us the best geometry based on the launch azimuth of the rocket. And there's plenty of things as we set up where you can set up things in the foreground for foreground interest. And I'll let you in on a secret. You got to bring your camera, you got to bring your tripod, and you got to bring a flashlight, because the flashlight is what's going to illuminate the foreground items. You're going to do light painting with your flashlight. And so, and when you get anywhere from 3 to 6 images, you will have one main image, which will be the street going up, but then you'll have other images of foreground interest, light painting. And those are the different images that you will layer in Photoshop to make them look like this one on the right, where you have all the items that were there, but they don't blow out or they're not silhouetted in black, and it gives you that picture. So if you are interested, please jot down that email address, ghe.air2air@gmail.com, and let me know you're interested in coming, and we'll look forward to it, and we'll gather together, and again, we'll have a couple of Zooms, one before and one after. Sound like fun for everybody?
Gordy,
Yes.
we cannot read your bottom line.
Can you read the email?
Yeah,
Okay. The bottom line, it says, and let me know that you're going to attend.
okay, and is that a new email address for you that we need to change?
It's not new to me. No, don't change it. I have about 7 email addresses and I use them for different purposes. That way I don't have everything on every subject all clogging one email box.
Okay,
So this is just one of my email addresses. And if I send you guys to this one, then I will be able to isolate and have a better shot at keeping track of who all's coming.
okay, I just didn't recognize it because I get a lot of fraud emails from you still, so.
Yep, that's it. Any other questions?
I have
Yes.
Is there going to be another session, Zoom session, or is it just a Zoom session involving this event?
This will be a Zoom session just for this event beforehand and just for this event afterwards. And
only those who are interested to go there.
yeah, if you don't go there and take the picture, but you want to sit in on a Zoom session, you're more than welcome. The Thursday Zoom session, I'm just going to talk about some of the basics, where we're going to go and that kind of stuff. And those of you who have been on our YouTube channel, there's about a hour and 40-minute video on my YouTube channel, or our YouTube channel, that I talked in depth about all of the planning that goes into rocket launch, street shots, and so on, how to do the processing and all that kind of stuff. So that wouldn't be a bad idea to watch that and kind of get a feel for it. And then on Thursday, I'm just going to give the basics, and then we'll go out and we'll talk about where we're going to go, where we're going to set up, how we're going to set up, all that kind of stuff. All righty. All right. Tonight, without further ado, we have Nick Stover, and he's from San Luis Obispo in California. Not from, but that's where he hangs out nowadays. Professional landscape photographer, nature. Tonight, he'll be talking about evaluating light and landscape photography. We're very honored to have Nick with us and the aspects of photography for our club members. Nick was raised in the high mountains of Western Colorado, so you can expect to see some mountain pictures when he goes out and shoots. He's been on National Geographic, 5 different TV channels, and PBS. He was over and took pictures of the Tour de France and so on. So he is a very, we are very honored to have Nick with us tonight. Here's a couple of his pictures. In his presentation, Nick will talk about some of the most important things in photography is how you look through the camera to make decisions about the light in your scene. Too often we just look and especially if we're stuck on automatic and just push the button and just, accept what we get. But light being infinitely variable, you can change how your picture is going to come out by just understanding light, using some of the other settings in the camera and so on. So with that, Nick, let's see here. I will do this. Then I will go down. I need to figure out how to get out of this.
Before we get to Nick, I'd just like to say, if you have questions, save them to the end of the program. Or you might be able to type them into the thing. I'll log them down and make sure everybody's question gets answered.
Okay, I have stopped sharing. Nick, you have the stick. You can go.
Sounds good. Well, I will start the share. Let's make sure I got my presentation correctly lined up. Oh, what is going on here? Hold on. One second. I just had a massive computer overhaul, and now I'm discovering all kinds of fun little things that should be working correctly, but so let me just do this one. Uh-oh. All right, I'm gonna have to quit Zoom and come right back in. So apologies for that. I'll be right back.
Okay, we'll hold your spot. Okay, this is going to be one of those unplanned chat sessions where everybody can tell us what they have been doing lately, and share with the club what have you been doing lately that that the rest of us would be interested in.
I'm back.
Oh, he's
Or we could talk. Wait for Nick. Let me.
back. Nick is back.
All right,
Let
so
me see.
now I need you to enable participant screen sharing.
Yep, I need to find you. You are all over the planet here. I have got 3 pages of people. Oh, there's Kathy Rowback. Hi, Kathy.
First page, 2, next to Richard.
Yeah, well, that may be where he is with you.
Where I'm hiding.
Yeah, I don't
The
see
yellow
you.
box.
I see him.
We can see him, but he can't see him.
We can see you.
Yeah, I don't know. Speaker. Gallery. I don't see Nick anywhere. I don't know why I'm not seeing Nick.
Nick, why don't you talk so your yellow box shows up
Yeah.
as
So
active?
I'll keep
Oh, there you
talking.
are.
Yeah.
I got you now, Nick.
Jeez.
You're right down at the bottom where all the other Nicks are.
Of course.
Why didn't I see that? Okay, make co-host. Yes. All right, you should have it now.
Okay. Looks like I do. All right. So we should be seeing the Snowmass Mountain, one of my home state mountains in Colorado. And then in a second, we will have the presentation.
Yep.
All right.
The mountain.
Can you see the slides now?
I'm not turning the slide off.
Yes, we can see him now.
All right, good. We're going to go. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Richard's been very kind. When he first reached out, I mentioned I was just returning from 10 weeks in Montana. So I actually just got back from Yellowstone and Glacier. So I was able to get a couple images in there back to my home area of California. Coincidentally, as we were talking as well, we have one interesting part about where I live on the Central Coast, and that's where we get the rockets from Vandenberg. Not quite as frequently or dramatically as you guys will see them out on the eastern side, and oftentimes we'll get them right in the middle of the day. But we do get those a few times, I don't know, 5, 6 maybe rockets a year, a couple missiles here and there. It's always good fun out here to be photographing. So I'm excited to talk about this. This is one of, if not my favorite topic to discuss, and that is evaluating and working with light and landscape photography. So I am Nick. This is me, handing there with my trusty Nikon, among other things. And I help amateur landscape photographers who are interested in deeper connections create more impactful images so they can confidently and consistently express themselves. So I am a full-time and I carefully use the term professional, but I am a full-time photographer and full-time photography educator. So I work with clients all over the US and in the UK, also Canada as well. And the big thing I want to stress when we talk about light, and a lot of my philosophy is that confidence and consistency. And that is a big part of light. Because we don't always get it the same period of time as we're out there within the field. Conditions can change. Our moods can change, especially if we're photographing in certain instances on auto or whatever else. We'll be seeing different captures at different points in time. And so today, I'm going to talk about some of the ways I evaluate the light. I work within the light, within the landscapes, to more consistently and confidently express myself. And so I'm not perfect in it. I don't get perfect light, but I can know a little bit and I can predict and work a little bit with what lighting is there. So we'll talk about that, because as photographers, we have many obsessions, whether it's gear or places to go, or in this case, as I saw leading into this, balloons or rockets. It doesn't really matter, because we have parts and pieces, but we need light to bring this to light. It is the most talked about part of photography, I would say, at least for the people that spend more time in the landscape. We want to know how to work with it and our subjects. And it goes back far before that. We, as modern landscape photographers, we're not the first to think about the value of light. Thomas Moran put the light in the landscape in prime focus. This was 1872. The Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. And what we saw in the painting of this is the same principles we should be striving for or looking for within our photography. So Moran used a lot of principles on how the eye sees images. We go towards the brightest part within our image. Without fail, we're going to go towards that waterfall very quickly. Then we have the cooler tones within the image that bring about depth and dimensionality, differing types of textures within the image as well. And so painting, using these principles in painting, is something that maybe even Bierstadt, you could say as well. He painted this from his studio in Rome, not even out within the field. Among the Sierra Nevada, and he's showing a deep understanding of the light within the landscape and how to create emotion, depth, dimensionality, all types of things within the image. And so looking at something like Bierstadt and how do we transition that into photography? Well, we go back not as far, but we go back to someone who launched the golden age of film. And I'm talking about George Eastman, founder of Eastman Kodak. And he talks about there of light makes photography. These are the early stages of film. Embrace light, admire it, love it. But above all, know light. Know it for all you are worth, and you will know the key to photography. So do you know what has changed since Eastman brought film out there and brought it to the masses, to the digital ages of today? Absolutely nothing. I would say these principles are still absolutely, without a doubt, one of the key principles to understand as we work through. And even today, we have masters of the modern light, the digital light, and how they work with it. People like Mark Adamus. Mark does expedition photography all over the globe, and his understanding of light principles is so unbelievably great. Josh Snow, as example, is more hypersaturated, but he understands how to use the light effectively in the scenes to build upon what's there. He's not photoshopping things in. He's using light bleeding, light blending techniques to really bring about a lot of different parts and pieces. Or Erin Bobnick. Erin is an art history major, and she actually waited, I believe, 9 days to capture this image because she, as a not art history, Masters of Fine Arts, she knew exactly what conditions needed to be there to produce what they wanted. So for her to get this to really look like cracking scales of skin or whatever else, but having the right kind of light. And so matching the two of them together is part of what we do. So how do we think about light? In this next little section, we'll talk about how we think about light before we go even further into the examples of how to describe it, etc. And so what exists between those masters of old, the Bierstadts and the Morans, and these masters or these emerging masters of the new, is each of us has an interesting opportunity for the dialogue with light to understand how the light interacts within there. So when we get into the golden hours, the afternoons and the mornings, where you guys get the sun rises over the ocean and we get the sunsets, what is actually occurring at that time is the light itself is not changing per se, but what it's having to do is now push through atmosphere, dust, particulates, and that begins to fracture or defracture, begins to bend, kind of shape the light a little bit, and as such, soften. So when we talk about that harsh light, we're talking oftentimes about the light that is over our head. And we'll talk about the principles of direction of light and how that goes into place. But when we start to think about the light and how it's lower in the sky, we're going to see different types of exaggeration within there. Just like my friend David with Exploring Exposure did this progression of light in Death Valley, is to see what happens, in this case, before sunset, all the way through after sunset. This is on the sand dunes, and how the light color begins to change within our scenes. So I thought this was an interesting experiment because we see that warm light on the top left as it kind of progresses through into the sunset golden light. We get more of the salmon colored times after sunset in the blue hour, and even after sunset, we're still pulling things out. And so experiments or things like this begin to help us to understand how the light interacts with our landscape medium of choice. We can't do this in all scenes, but if we start to do this in certain types of scenarios, especially in our home areas, we start to see how that can impact mood and go forward. So when we talk about the devices of today, and we'll talk about the eye, and then we'll get into the images, the DSLRs that most people photograph with today, well, these are fancy, incredible pieces of equipment. They are absolutely fascinating to me, of all the optics and how everything works, but everything within the camera serves one purpose. It has one place, and that is to direct the light onto our sensor. So don't think of the camera as this special piece of equipment that's going to automatically make you a better photographer, rather something you, as the photographer, as the creative, as the artist, has that opportunity to control. We get the opportunity to control how we harvest this light, how we bring it about, and what we do with it afterwards. Because we as humans, surprisingly, are still superior to even the best cameras out there. Our eye is the equivalent of a 576 megapixel camera.
Wow.
We can see about a nighttime ISO of 800. So we ourselves are still the light harvesters, the best one there. The only place I would say where the camera has advantage is our focal length is mainly fixed at between 22 and 35 millimeters. So we don't get that zoom we can get with the camera, but more on that in a second. So your camera, how do we see the light? How does our camera see the light? How do we display? And this is a key thing to understand the range of light. So there is about 30 stops of light on this planet in the world, from the darkest of darks to the brightest of brights. Us as humans, we can only see about 24 stops of light. So we get about 6 stops on the edge where we don't even have the capability to see. Most cameras today can see around 14 stops of light. So we're starting to exclude a little bit more of the brights and the brights and the darks and the darks. And then we have to take this one step further though. Our devices, our phones, our phones, our computers, our printing can only detail about or display about 10 stops of light. So when we think about this and how we put pressure at times to bracket our images or HDR them or whatever, do other things, we're not trying to bring back the full 30 stops of light that exists within the planet, nor are we trying to bring about the 24 stops of light that are out there. We're trying to fill in the small portions of what we can see and to selectively display what is out there. So keeping this in mind, how the world is, how we see it, what our cameras can record, but also what is displayed within our work. And so let's start to think about how we see this. So when I ask the question, and most time people need to look away real quick and then look back, and I'll ask you first, which one of these two do you notice first?
The one on the left.
One on the left. Yep. And that's the answer most people say. And then if I ask a second question, so now look away and then look back and tell me which one of these two is longer or looks longer.
One on the right.
The one on the right. And that's the answer most people give as well. Not all. We have some of us see worlds differently, or monitors are calibrated, or et cetera, et cetera. And here's the thing. These are exactly the same length. And what the principle that's in place, if there's one good thing to pull away from today, hopefully there's more than one, but if there's one good one to put through, is how we see the light and what happens. So warm colors, like on the left, they tend to advance. They tend to go towards us, versus cooler colors tend to recede or look further away. So understanding this principle in nature photography, which we'll talk about in lots of examples, is going to help to create movement. It's going to help to create interaction. It's really going to help you to direct within your images where people want to go, because we as humans, we have cones and rods that are programmed. They cannot see it differently. The longer wavelength light, the cools, the reds, the warms, the reds, the oranges, the yellows, they are simply a longer wavelength light. Now we will see the longer wavelength lights sooner, versus the cooler lights are shorter wavelength. We're going to see those things. So that's why the shadows are cooler. It's cooler light that's not getting reflected back towards us in such a way. And so we, as humans, we simply don't have a choice. I can't tell you how many times with clients, they'll be like, I'm like, where do you want the person to look within this image? And they're like, oh, I want them to look at this dark boulder out there in the distance. I'm like, well, what about that bright waterfall? Well, I don't want them to look there. But that's not the way we can see it. We will go and focus on the objects that are the brightest, that are the most attention grabbing first. There's a lot of different principles of why that is. Some of it's danger, some of it's the way we've been programmed over time. But we need to understand that as we direct and we think about the value of the light in our photography. So taking a scene like this, and this wasn't on my most recent trip, this was 3 years ago, the Grand Tetons, the Moose, there is a lot of stuff going on within the scene. It's a great opportunity to be in the right place at the right time. No, I didn't pay the Moose to be there, or Moose didn't have an agent to all of a sudden release it just at the right period of time. But how the light interacts within this scene really brings about a lot of the value within this photo. The warms and the cools, the different types of textures, and the different levels or gradations of the lighting into the trees, into the fog, into the mountains themselves. These are all bringing about a lot of depth and dimensionality. And this is what I'm talking about when we start to look at, or the science of what I would consider compelling images. There's basically 5 main things I want to teach on a continual basis. Depth. How can we bring out dimensionality? This is where we can focus on transitions. And when we talk about transitions within our photography, we're talking about things like warms to cools, brights to darks, shadows to highlights, textured to untextured, which we'll get into here in a second. But these types of transitions really bring out a lot of dimensionality and interaction. Then we also have focus within our images. Where do we want the viewer to focus within the image, and how are we using these principles in such a way to assist that? So yes, we can do a lot of this through composition. We can do a lot of it through post-processing, but ultimately there's going to be certain places people focus, and how are we helping to guide them through depth and other things, which is the same principle as sharpness. So I don't do a tremendous amount of focus stacking. I do it from time to time because the eye does not see the world completely uniformly sharp from front to back. Not all images should be pinpoint sharp in the landscapes within nature things. What you should be seeing is that which is the closer to you should be the sharpest. And then as it goes away, it can be less sharp. This will bring more depth and dimensionality within the scene, which is also part of textures. When we think about textures, what do people want to touch? What do they want to interact with? What are they seeing, they feeling, they're touching? These are all things that lighting can really be brought about, because the final principle of luminosity is one we can't ignore. The eye will always go to the brightest spot within our images. So understanding how this works, how we work with the sunset, how we do these types of things within there will help to do things like showing depth or progression within our images. So the eye can make distance leaps. So when we talk about the principles of darkness, so that which is closest to me, which is the furthest away from the sun, should be the darkest, which it is. I didn't open up the image completely with the shadows or HDR or do something else, because I want to be able to show the depth and progression as we get further towards the bright sun that's out there, that's kind of casting. What that's doing is creating space within your image. It's bringing back dimensionality, and the gradients of brightness is we're getting layers and levels within our images, because the number one thing we really can go for is interaction within our images. So we talked about warms and cools, we talked about textures, we talked about a lot of these things, but now let's look at it. So we're going from the cooler wavelength lights, the cooler light that's in the ocean itself, the cooler wavelength light that's in the seaweed, towards the warm. And what is happening is we're able to bounce back and forth. We have anchor points, we have different textures, we have different leading lines. I'm using the lines going up within the ocean itself out towards that sunset. And so we can start to interact. There's not huge areas leading us off. There's not a lot of weight on one side of this image. So we have the, kind of the cliff over on the right, which is containing the eye and allowing you to kind of go back through and interact with this scene in different ways. And so without the light that brings about this interaction within the scene, we have what we call a flat image. And I'm not here to say flat images are bad images, but flat images aren't going to have oftentimes the interaction we're seeking within our scenes or our images. And so if we can have images that have that capability for interaction, there's going to be a lot more of this. So a couple things I want to talk about before we talk about how light shapes our images. One, if you got your phone and you want to get this reference sheet and a couple other ones that are there, you can use the QR code or just your camera. If you hold your camera up to this little QR thing, you'll get access to sign up to my newsletter. I'd love to have you on there. I don't spam. You can unsubscribe any point in time. Richard can attest. Most recent images with the stories of Yellowstone has lots of tips and tricks, etc. But I'll be able to send out some reference sheets of this one here. Also get you added to the newsletter as well if you want to be for some of the upcoming classes and online workshops, in-person classes that should be resuming. Fingers crossed here soon as well. Because we're going to talk about here, and anywhere you see our QR code, you can just scan it and sign up for the newsletter and just let me know where you came from, and I'll drop you these different things that are in here, a lot of different light resources. So what we are going to talk about next with the image examples, and pay attention because after we go through angle, direction, color, and intensity with examples and what to look for, I'm going to ask you guys, those of you in Florida, to describe, or I guess we got Ohio as well, we got Belgium as well, to describe what you're seeing within the scenes. So what kind of light is shaping as well. So we're going to go through angle, direction, color, and intensity as we work our way through. So first thing is angle. And I talk a lot about light. I didn't have the opportunity to ever meet Galen Rao. I love his understanding of light. I love his understanding of the mountains and the light as well. And the way he talks about it is really prolific. The landscape is like being there with a powerful personality. And I'm searching for just the right angles to make that portrait come across as meaningful as possible. And so when we think about the landscape, we're looking for the angles oftentimes that are going to bring about and really work with all these. And when we're talking about the angle of light, we're going to start with, well, basically there's only two major ways to think about the angle of light. We have high angle light, which is our typical midday light. There's much more white light in here. Very little shadow detail can exist in this type of light. It's oftentimes called more harsh. But if you look at certain scenes, you consider certain scenes like this one of the wave in Arizona, I don't want shadow detail. I don't want part of this image in the shadow and part of it in the brights for the secular highlighting. I want to have a full uniform brightness all the way through there to be able to showcase what I'm going for, the lines and the textures within here versus low angle light. So when I'm working with low angle light, that's a warmer light. I'm going to lose some shadows. I'm going to lose some of that. I'm I'm going to gain some shadows, and I'm going to get more detail and much better transitions within the scene. And so this particular scene here, we can see a lot more of the shapes that are coming through. We're getting a different vibe. We're getting a different feel, a lot more warmth in the sky as well. So that kind of understanding of the angle will be considerably helpful. What takes us to direction. So we have two types of angles, and then we're going to talk about the various types of direction. So I find some of the hardest photography and the most challenging I've ever done. It's a real challenge to work with natural features and natural light. So when we're talking about, I'm finding when he's talking about this, he's talking about nature photography. So we are actually working within the features that are there. We can't necessarily move mountains or control wildlife, but we can understand the direction of the light and what it's going to do to our subjects. And so when we look at something like front light, so this is Glacier, this is Many Glacier Hotel, sunrise at a point in time here, a little bit of smoke haze out there. And front light is probably my least favorite light because the light is in fact striking the front of my image. So the sun is coming up behind me, and what it's doing here and why I don't love front light, even though I'll photograph in it, I love the golden glows we'll sometimes get on the mountains, is it's flattening out my image. And it's oftentimes much, much harsher within the scene. So this is a very harsh scene, very harsh light. This is actually taken with a panoramic feature on the iPhone, not even with my regular camera. I didn't take the camera on this particular exposition or this particular journey. And that light is flattening things out. So that angle and the direction is the low angle, and we're not getting the kind of dimensionality and detail we're going to see in different other types of light. So something to keep in mind with front light, we're not going to see a lot of the details we want to see. Versus backlight, well, this is when our subject is in front of our light source, which is usually our sun and landscape or nature photography. And that backlighting, we can get the details, we can get the textures, whether it's moss hanging down on branches, or in this case, the arterial branching that happens within an oak tree as it's coming out. So I wanted to be able to show how it branches out in kind of an arterial way. This might help you a little bit to understand silhouetting as you get into your challenge this next month, because backlighting is really, really a key part of silhouetting. Low angle really, really helps with backlighting as well. But we'll also have other types of backlighting. So backlighting is a great opportunity to get creative with things like the sun stars. So this is a small aperture f/16 on a wide angle lens, 14 to 24 meter, using a portion of the mountain itself to block. So if you get a small blocking, the aperture will kind of bring about, oftentimes, if you have the right lens and it's clean enough, which isn't always, the sun star kind of function. This is an example where it is considerably helping to direct the eye exactly where you want it to go. So that backlighting portion is really helping. Backlighting, oftentimes, it doesn't have to always be low angle. You can sometimes get the backlighting sun star effect in the middle of the day by finding a small object to put in place to do there. So if we have front light and backlight, then we also have side light. And if I'm going to pick a favorite now, I'm going to pick side light as my favorite. And it's going to be typically falling around a 90-degree angle from your camera. So this particular case on the left, I'm getting some reflected side lighting up in the high Sierra on this foxtail pine, which is bringing about depth and dimensionality. And that's why I love side lighting. So this one here on Torres del Paine in Patagonia, similar thing. You can see the depth and the dimension, some of the size of these mountains, these valleys that are going or progressing up within there. So that low angle light also really adds to the effect. So side lighting is the best lighting for dimensionality. Now, the last two are a little bit different to consider, but I do want to point out a couple things. One, top lighting. We can get this one in certain cases or instances. We get it all the time when the sun's above us, but we don't actually see the display of lighting itself as it's coming down. But top lighting, we can see this with crepuscular rays or God rays that we see from time to time based on the atmosphere, the moisture, humidity, dust, other particulates there. We'll sometimes see the light beams coming down. We get it in the Slot Canyon, sometimes within Arizona and Utah, this case here in Antelope Canyon in just outside of Page, where we're seeing the light beams themselves actually striking the dust that's been stirred up within the cave and creating those light beams. So it's a harsh light. If you are photographing top light, oftentimes the light is the subject itself versus the subjects that are around there. So you're not going to get a lot of exaggeration. I'm getting a lot of reflected light in here, as you can see, that's kind of lighting up the canyon as it goes down. So thinking about top lighting, I don't have a lot of displays of top lighting. And one that I just have to throw in there is down lighting. And so down lighting is something you have to be directly above something to get this effect. So you can't just get it from a high peak, but you can get it from a plane or a drone. This one's taken out of a plane. And what downlighting shows you is the depth of something. And nothing's going to be more dramatic than the grand prismatic in this particular case and instance. And for those of you paying attention, which I think is a large portion of you, this might look familiar to something we saw earlier on. How we see the light, the wavelengths in the nanometers of those things that are actually playing in the warms and the cools. And we go back to this scene or instance here, and the algae and the combination of the hot springs and all the other parts and pieces that go in to make the grand prismatic so interesting are at play. We have the warms really kind of echoing down, the reds going down into the yellows, going down into the greens. Then we get into the blues and then the deeper blues, almost the teals, as we work our way down into the depths, which is the exact same way as we see the light that goes within the prism itself. So prismatic is a good portion. So thinking about the direction of light will take us into color. And when we talk about this, and we'll go back to Galen's words, I almost never set out to photograph a landscape, nor do I think of my camera as a means of recording a mountain. My first thought is always of light. And that is the way we can always be thinking about it. And the color of light is an interesting thing to think about, because before I was a photographer, I never really thought about the color of light per se. Yeah, I see a beautiful sky and I would notice it, or other parts and pieces, or maybe notice the deep purples or the dark of night, etc. But as we think of the color of light, many of us think of Roy G. Biv back from our school days, of the colors of the rainbow: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, I believe is the way it went. And that spectrum of color we can see from time to time, but the display and the variety when we look at a scene like this. So this is an intentional camera movement at a sunset, which would be a sunrise for you on the beaches here in California. And what we have going on, this is the area that's out of the spray, out of the ocean. These are where the waves themselves are actually crashing. So we have like a tan color kind of moving more into a muted color. And then we have the darker colors of the ocean themselves. And then we have the horizon, the sunset, and then the area kind of above the horizon and the sunset. And so what we're seeing within a scene like this is that the play out of the different colors of the light and how they're interacting, and how we oftentimes will focus just on the color of the sunset. Most time we will skip over, going back to the principle of going to the brighter spots, all of the other textures and the lines that are within our scenes. So when we think of the color of light, there's basically two main drivers of this and how it interacts within the scene. We're going to have something like cool or blue light. This is typically the blue hour, 1 hour before to 1 hour after sunset. That will vary. I can tell you this time and time again, that will vary considerably based on your latitude and the time of year. So this is in Alaska. This was March. This was, I had blue hour here for hours, it seemed. The only thing that sent me inside was I was freezing. It was negative 25 below when I was out photographing, versus blue hour, middle of the summer in the high Sierra, for example. We're talking a matter of minutes because the sun is so much lower and it does not last all the way through. But this will bring about a different type of feeling. When we're working with blue hour light, we're going to see more coolness within our scenes. We can also see scenes like this. This is coastal Sea Spires just north of here, south of Big Sur. And the blue lighting that's happening here, this is after the sun's gone down. We have a marine layer in place. And the reason I like working with blue hour light sometimes is I'm not getting direct light within my scene. So I'm going to be able to portray or bring out a scene where you can't really tell where the sky ends and the ocean begins. I've had people look at this image and thought it was the tops of mountains with the fog kind of misting around there, or other things as well. And that evenly lit or ethereal photo that has a lot of mystery within it is really brought forth at the points in time when you don't have direct lighting within your scene. So thinking about cooler blue and how to use it, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the characteristics, or golden light. The sun nears the horizon, we're getting those rays, that amazing dramatic landscape photo. The warms and the cools in this case are playing off each other. So we have the coolness of the sky, the warmness of the setting sun, the water reflecting here back some of that golden light. It's the great part for low angle. Sometimes we'll get that backlighting. Sometimes we can get the side lighting to really bring things out. But most of the time, we're going to be photographing directly into the sun to be able to get the most impact of the golden of the sunrise light. The neutral or mixed is another subset we can work with from time to time. So this is Death Valley, the Eureka Dunes. This one actually is focal length blended and focus stacked for both effects. One, to be able to bring in the true size of the sand dune. This is a 600 foot, 580 foot high sand dune. These are the mud down there themselves, but I'm playing with it. I'm working with the neutral and the mixed portion. I talk about this image in my technique, vision, and processing class, and what went into planning it and executing it, knowing that I was going to be in the shade most of the time, and then trying to get the warmth back up within there. So working within the scene to bring out that neutral and the mixed light. So there's that opportunity. Yes, you're going to be directed towards the sand dune, but you're going to be able to work back through the different lines, the different textures, the different shapes within the mud itself as you go through. And then the other thing I'll say on the color of light before we talk about intensity and then put you guys on the spot, and then we'll do some bits towards the end of other tips and tricks of working with it, is to just give it time. And we can talk about this in so many different contexts related to our photography, but today we're going to talk about light. So this is 6:16 p.m. And what does that number mean? It's actually sunset time here in, this is called Yant Flat. This is above St. George. So we're at sunset time. So we should be going, great, we're in golden hour. This should be perfect lighting, yet it's not. It's nowhere close to what I want to portray, or ultimately what I wanted to show. So I'm now at 7:04, 25 minutes after the end of golden hour. Technically, some people would say after the end of blue hour. And now I'm photographing at ISO 320 and a 3-second exposure. And I don't talk technical terms very often, but I want to point out why that's important. And why it's important is my eye could barely see what was actually in place, but I knew that the dynamic range of my camera and my sensor could pick up and portray what I wanted to later. And what I wanted to be able to show was the ebbs and the flows of this kind of wave as it was forming through here, the lines within the sand, formed sand dunes or sandstone here, the textures, the lichens that were going on here with as well. And that was not possible until I didn't have that direct light on my scene. Up here, I have too many of the highlights and the shadows to get to what I particularly wanted within the scene. So sometimes we have to be very, very patient and understand what the lighting is going to do to bring forth what we want. All right, so we've talked about angle, direction, color. Now let's talk about intensity. So I'm going to go for the final time to Galen. When the light is right and everything is working for you, sometimes mere seconds can make the difference between a superb image and a mundane one. And he's absolutely right. There's periods of time when we're working within the light where we have to be, or photographing a rocket, we have to be extremely prepared to respond exactly when it's needed. And then there's other times we don't have to honor or work with a relentless sense of urgency within our work. So it's understanding the intensity of the light will dictate what's in place. So when we talk about the intensity of light, it's not an all bad or all on thing. You know, we talk about people as intense. Oh God, that person's intense. We all know what intense people feel like, but intense light or the intensity of light can be harsh in a scene or a situation like this. This is obviously Yosemite, or for those of you that have been to Yosemite, up above Half Dome. And this particular day, there wasn't a cloud in the sky. And that light went from no light at all to super, super harsh within matters of seconds. And I put this image in here not because I love the image, but just to illustrate that intensity. So sometimes it's an all on or all off type of thing. Other times we can work with it, and we may need to work with it in a very short period of time. So refracted light, very unique light to see. This is where the light is striking something, reflecting off of that, and then refracting within the landscape that's actually in front of us. So these are pools in a high lake in the Sierra. So in this case here, the sun is striking the granite. It is reflecting off the granite, which is softening it, and then it's refracting in these pools. So we're getting these little refracted kind of whirlpools within there, and we're getting the play of the warms and the cools within there. So we're bringing about a lot of dynamicism within this image, both between the curvature and the lines and the warms and the cools. But refracted light does not last very long. It has to have the right conditions, the right kind of angles, the right kind of light intensity to be able to work versus reflected light. So reflected light is bouncing directly off of one object, this case here, the aspen trees in Colorado in the middle of the day, and is being cast onto another thing. So we can still see the reflected light that's going on within the trees. We can make out some of the form, but what is happening here is the light itself is not taking on a different form. It's taking on an opportunity to be able to show it in a different way. So the lighting itself is still here, but we've softened the trees. We've softened the leaves, that's the word I'm looking for, the leaves within there. So the orange glow that was present is now reflecting back and within the scene. So we're creating a totally different scene within there. Reflected light, you can work with this all throughout the day. I worked with it in the mornings, I worked with it in the evenings, I worked with it in the middle of the day, similar to ambient lighting. So ambient lighting is subtle and warm. And so this scene in direct bright light would be very off-putting. Harsh lines, these angular lines are going to feel very, very agitating. But in the right kind of condition, the right kind of light, I'm getting very, very soft ambient light going through the trees down into this. This is in a backpacking part of the Sierra. And we're bringing about with lack of direct light, we're getting some of that softness within our scenes, and we can work scenes like this with very little urgency. Yeah, the sun can move, but you don't have to be prepared to capture it within an instant. So ambient light is kind of trickling down through. It's kind of coming through in small little shafts. Diffused lighting, well, then we're going to start to see locations, lots of textures. So we get butterfly swarms in the winter here, nothing like they used to be. And what we get going on here is I can tell you from time and time of judging contests here on the coast, most of the time when people try to photograph butterflies, they blow out the highlights like crazy because they're extremely difficult. They're up in the dark trees and these things are extremely reflective, but diffuse lighting, clouds, in a situation like this, I'm getting just a little bit of diffuse lighting working through there. The angle of the light is still worth noting, but not absolutely critical. So I'm getting some side light, some dimensional light. It's diffusing down through there. And now I'm able to capture the scene the way I want. I got some depth. I got some variation. I don't have to be constantly worried about blowing out my highlights. And you can see what I'm capturing within there. So working with diffuse light brings about scenes like this, or flat or even light. So you could say, yeah, there's a little bit of ambient light in here. There's a little bit of diffused light in here. So we're getting some ambient light. This is the H-O-H rainforest in Olympic National Park. Just second rainiest place in the world, I think, behind Kauai. And I could see why it rained the whole time. And the flat light here, what it's doing is enabling me to work a scene constructively over a couple-hour period. So I wasn't in any sort of rush. I worked the scene one direction going out, worked the scene a different way going back. And as I started to see the storm breaking up, I started to get the lighting conditions I wanted. I started to get some of the light kind of working its way through from the left, bringing out the separation within our scenes. So that is one of the things in a scene like this in direct light, you're not going to get tonal separation. You're not going to get color separation. In this scene now, you can see different textures, you can see different lights, you can see different variations of the fronds, you can see different variations of the mosses, you can see the trees itself as well. And so the flat or even light allows you to be able to separate those out. Side note on this one, and I won't go into much detail on it, when I post process, I had to desaturate like crazy my greens even before I started processing, because the camera sensor saw so much green, it was adding tons of magenta, and it wasn't creating any separation. So it's just interesting to see the camera in this case was seeing so much green that it was saturating everything. So I had to actually back off the saturation considerably to get the color separation that I wanted and not have it look nuclear. So we have those on the one side. On the other side is that spotlighting. So we have to be prepared. Crepuscular rays, really quick periods of time, those God rays that are going through there. Sometimes we can see them. We can see the breaks in the clouds. And in this case, I'll go to this image here, I could see the light rays as I got down to the scene here. And I was kind of hoping they were going to hold, but how this image here, well, it's still kind of nice. This one here, okay. But is there an opportunity to really play around? I'm getting distinct beams. Oh gosh, there's a rock that's out there in the distance. Can I get myself or put myself in a position to be able to capture that scene? And that's exactly what happened. I call this my Goldilocks wave. Not too little, not too much, just right. Just the right amount of light hitting that thing. Just the right amount of light to create those variations between brights and darks, lights and shadows, highlights and shadows. I'm going to say these words kind of constantly all the way through because these are key parts to understand drama, impact, bringing these things forth. Without that dramatic lighting in place, yes, I have a cool wave that's being captured, but that lighting really brings it all forth. And then we have dappled light. So dappled light here, this was from my glacier trip. Still the most beautiful day I had up there, backpacking or hiking on the Dawson-Pitamakan Loop. You can take a boat to get here and get you up to a period of time pretty quickly, which is nice. Uh-oh. Can you guys still hear me? I just got an alert that said my AirPods.
Yep, we got you loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. I just saw this weird alert that said it was my AirPods were connected. So I'm like, whoa, that's not good. So here, dappled lighting. We're getting relatively high lighting within the sky. So I have, midday, mid-afternoon light here, but I have beautiful, beautiful clouds, big puffies in here. Getting that softness between the bright spotlight areas, and it can be very dramatic. This is bringing about so much drama. You're seeing so much depth working with this type of dappled lighting. You can really feel kind of the scale that's in place. So anytime I can get dappled light in the grand landscapes, I am a very, very happy person, which is great. All right, so now it's your turn. So we're going to use these descriptors. I'm here to help. I'm not here to shame. There's no such thing as a bad answer or a wrong answer. And we're going to go through a couple images real quick, kind of using the descriptors to describe the image using angle, direction, color, and intensity, and what's in place. So we'll start with this one. This one's Greenland. And who wants to give it a go to talk about what we're dealing with?
Direction of light. I see the shadowing that comes in, even though it's not extraordinarily harsh. It's very noticeable, and it paints the difference between the darker areas in the mountains and the brighter areas down below. So I see the direction of the light as being a big part on this one.
Yeah. Yeah. And using kind of building on that, which is exactly where we're going. We got that low angle light, which is bringing about the direction. We have a little bit of a backlighting, but also a little bit of a side lighting when we talked about the two. So backlighting, we really have a strong focal point, but then the side lighting is bringing about a lot of the dimensionality where we can see the mountains themselves. We can see the texture, we can see the depth of this valley as we kind of can go further back into it as well. The color, building on that, which we can talk about as well, as the warms and the cools. And so I've found time and time again, my favorite images, I'm seeing both warms and cools. So I'm seeing the mixed lighting within there, which is evoking a lot of movement. The intensity, yeah, we're seeing a little bit of spotlighting. We're seeing a little bit of that dappled lighting as well. That's kind of bringing about that scene. So well done. Nice to have. All right, two more. Who's the next taker? This is the Vernal Falls in Yosemite.
Side lighting. Side lighting.
Yep.
Can I try to take a look?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I know there's the intensity coming from the black and, you know, the tree next to those branches, and it has a bit of color in it. You know, those trees in the sunlight.
Yep. Yeah, so we have some of that. It's very, I would say it's a very intense light. Actually, the way it's the sun, and you can tell a couple things on it. One, the fact that there's so much blue in the sky and actually desaturated the sky a little indicates that the sun is up quite a ways. It's not like when you're at sunrise, you're rarely going to get a really blue sky. You're oftentimes going to, and so the sun's been up a little ways. So it's a really intense light, but by being so intense, it's actually muted and accentuated by the mist itself. So I knew that this was runoff time, and I'm going to get in a position where that mist on the mist trail is going to be coming up and diffusing that light a little bit. So you can almost see the beams as they kind of work their way through.
Awesome.
Well done, team effort. All right, final one. Then we'll wrap up towards the end with some tips and tricks on light and get into Q&A.
That's front light.
Top light, I'd say.
No, it's front light.
Yeah.
You're getting it from the height.
It's more back, it's actually more backlight. So we got to think the way we describe light is where it's interacting, how it's interacting with our subject. So front light would have actually been shining onto it versus kind of backlighting behind there.
That's what I mean.
Diffused, should it be diffused light?
I think that's a great way. Yep. We're seeing diffused, a little bit dappled.
There's some dapple.
Low angle.
Low angle, yep. Which is creating the textures. So.
A little bit of refracted light, perhaps.
Refracted usually with the light takes on a different form. And so it's not refracting through something, in like refracted light is most of the time going to be in water. That you're going to see that, but
it's also the color of the light.
yes. Yep. And that's the color where we have a little, once again, a little bit of the cools, a little bit of the warms and a little bit of the cools. And the green, if you think about reds and yellows and oranges are the really, really warm lights, and green is their kind of our go-between, yellow and blue make green. So we're kind of sitting closer to the cool part, but there's a lot of warmth within there as well. These are oftentimes the most challenging images to process as well, because you want to keep separation between things. So well done, Florida. Well done. All right. So let's talk about the last little bit. I think we've got about 10 minutes left, thereabout. Then as much time for questions as you need. So how can we most effectively use light in our images? Well, we can use it to focus attention. And I think I've talked enough about warms and cools and going towards the brightest spots, but using the light here, this is mid-morning, about 9:30 in the morning. I'd gotten there for sunrise and I didn't like the lighting I had at all. But I liked the lighting I had when I went back around midday. I was seeing that dappled light coming through. I knew it was going to be low angle, kind of coming down the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone, which was probably going to lead towards this alternation between warms and cools or highlights and shadows within there. But I had that strong point to focus attention within the scene, along with the really dark storm clouds. And so using the light here was really helpful to focus that attention. And so I'm able to use the framing principles of photographing within the trees as well to hold in your attention. There's no way for the eye to kind of wander out. The blues or the dark within the skies up above are staying in place much more. And so focusing the attention to exactly where I want you to focus within there, which is a part of how we can use the light. We can also use or work with the light to demonstrate transitions. And so I like this image. It's not going to ever be a top seller for me or anything else, but I like this one as a teaching principle. I like it as a personal principle of what attracts me to photography for a couple reasons. One, we have different types of textures. We have the more traditional sand dune here that you see in the foreground, and then we have much more shaped by the wind and everything else. And we have these transitions from the warm. You're going to be immediately drawn towards that warm, but then we have that reflected light. So when we talk about reflected light, it's reflecting off that dune and warming up the other one that's in the shadows. And so what is going on here? People have asked me, did you see this image within the field? And I'll be honest and I'll say no. When I took this image, I wasn't quite as aware of light, but now I would see a scene like this because I can see the definitive lines that are also created. So we have the really sharp lines that are kind of sectioning off the image as well. And so by understanding the light where things are getting that direct warmth and where things are in the shadows and are cooler, that can help us to form those transitionary lines. And that's why sand dunes are such a popular thing to photograph because they're such ever changing based on lights we'll talk about here in a second. The other way we can use light is to tell a story. And so this image here, this one's called Heart of Stone. I didn't Photoshop this image into have the flowers look like a heart, nor did I sit there just opportunistic, sit there for periods of time to get the light to almost completely split the piece of granite. I got lucky. It happens sometimes in photography, but I wanted to use the light to tell a story. And when we talk about this, we're going to talk about an Italian term, and no, I'm not going to say Olive Garden. I'm going to say chiaroscuro. And chiaroscuro is an Italian artistic term, which means the combination of light and dark. And you've heard me talk about this enough, but I want to emphasize it one more time. And that emphasis of light and dark is a key thing to understand when we process our images. So the processing here on the left, the first time I processed it on a black and white, the story was gone. There was no story. There was no Heart of Stone. There was no division between the light and the dark and how things went. So I needed to be careful as I processed this image to not brighten up the left too much, not keep the left too bright or the right too dark, but kind of bring them up and balance them together so you could see the form that existed within this image and how things took place. And so thinking about how we're going to tell a story will impact our processing. And so processing our images to kind of match that is a big part of where we go going forward. The other thing we can use lighting for is to produce different effects. And I'm going to show you how I used photo pills to execute this image here. So this is the final image. This is the Oceano Dunes, just south of where I live in San Luis Obispo. And so when I got out there, or I should say, as I was walking through the day, I used photo pills to determine at 9:11 p.m., give or take, I was going to have a pretty good alignment on the sand dune leading out to where the Milky Way would be coming up. So we're going to see vertical Milky Way this time of year. Then we'll get into the spring, we'll get the horizontal. But what happened, and I knew this, if I photographed at prime time when the Milky Way came out, I would have none of those textures and the lines within the sand dune itself. There's just not enough ambient lighting within the sky to create those textures. Yes, you can light paint and try to bring that back, but trying to light paint a sand dune of this size is a tremendous task. So I elected to do some post-processing combination. So I waited till after the blue hour was done, what was called the post-blue hour astronomical twilight. You could start to see a little bit of the stars in the sky, but way too much of the sun on the horizon to be able to get the textures and the lines that I wanted. And then I just combined those two images together very simply in Photoshop. So I can preserve the textures within that, the lines within the sand dunes, and still have my Milky Way sky out there within the distance. So that's part of how we can use the lighting and understanding it. We can also do that. And part of this is what I was talking about earlier, is revisiting locations in different times of light. So I'm very lucky. I have some sand dunes about 30 minutes from my house that I can go to in different conditions, different lighting conditions, blue hour light, sunset light, post sunset light, night lighting, day lighting, doesn't really matter. And I can start to work a scene and see it differently. And as I see scenes differently, I'm able to figure out how I'm going to produce different effects. We're going to be seeing different types of lighting. So the side lighting is going to reflect things differently than the back lighting as we see up here, et cetera. So it's been a good experiment to go back to the same place time and time again in different times of lighting as well. So keep that in mind. The other is to photograph for black and white. And so you can turn your camera into monochrome mode. And when you turn your camera into monochrome mode, you will be able to see scenes like this as you photograph. And so this particular scene of corn lilies photographing there, I kind of had a pretty good idea. I wanted to photograph this in black and white. I thought the lines within the corn lilies themselves were going to show up really nicely in black and white. Yes, it was a green scene, but there's different variations within there. So understanding the light and how it interacts with our scenes will help you in your black and white photography as well. And then working with the lighting we have is a big part what's there. So this is my bison friend from the trip to Yellowstone. Working with that light, we had the mist coming up, and it was like a frosty morning. It was 24 degrees in the middle of September, of course. You Floridians are shivering. And I'm working with the light I had. And I got lucky that this guy was working the scene towards me. But as the sun was starting to break through that a little bit, I was able to put myself in a position to get just enough light on his face to be able to showcase the frost, to be able to showcase the facial things as a whole. So working with the light by positioning myself, and that was part of it too. There's a lot of variety of bison that were out there, but I was like, okay, if I position myself here, then I might have the right lighting conditions to be able to showcase the image the way I want, which is great. Okay, so final two things, and then we'll Q&A. One is, here's a QR code as well to go to my tutorials. I have a whole bunch of different tutorials. And right now I'm running a special. I should actually put in there. And my code right now on tutorials is fall50. And my website is stoverphoto.com. There's no space in Stover. Why? There we go. That one's there. And I'm running a special. Tutorials are half off right now. So you can basically get 2 for 1. All my tutorials come with a 100% money back guarantee. So if you try one, you don't like it or it doesn't fit, feel free to ask for your money back. No questions asked. I don't have people do that very often, but every once in a while, something won't fit. A bunch of different topics on there, a good opportunity to learn different things. The one deal, the best deal of them all is my preparing your images for print. You can pick that one up for $25, and it includes a $60 print credit for a 16 by 20 metal. So it's like, whoa, I think more than pays for itself. So check those out. I'll also be unveiling here soon. I was about to, and then the Delta variant hit, and we all don't have to explain, my infield workshops. So I'll be resuming infield teaching now that we're kind of at the tail end, fingers crossed, and then we're all the way through some of the different ones. So there's some information on there, and if you want to get added or express interest for one workshop more than another, please do so as well. The other thing about joining my website, my newsletter, I'll be announcing my upcoming online courses or online classes I'll be teaching. I'm working on my dates right now, but I think I'll be teaching about 9 classes between now and April timeframe. So love to see you for some of those. And then I want to say thank you for that opportunity to be here today. The work I do, I don't consider myself I wouldn't say gifted. I consider myself extremely fortunate, nor do I take it for granted that I can share my experiences with you and be with you today. And then I get to call this my profession. So thank you for the support of artists like me. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. And hopefully, fingers crossed, that we brought forth some of that confidence to consistently express yourself all the way through. So with that, I'm going to stop my share, and then we'll take, I got a couple questions that came through in the chat to me, and then I will take as many other questions as are out there.
Well, Nick, I'd like to just say on behalf of the Camera Club of Brevard, thank you so much for a fabulous presentation. I know we all enjoyed it. I did. And if there's anything that sums up your presentation, along with many of the others, is planning is key, as opposed to just stumbling around and finding stuff by luck. When you go out and you pre-plan or pre-scout out a place, a lot of times that is going to be the make it or break it, knowing where the sun is going to be coming up, knowing how it's going to interact and all that. So planning is a big part of this. And a lot of people don't realize it, or a lot of our presenters don't mention that, but planning is a big part of it.
Yep. And planning is, people ask me a lot of times about planning, and I tell them it's not about planning your specific shot that you necessarily want to take, but it's about planning and understanding the field conditions you're going to be dealing with. And so when I go to places personally, I don't want to copy somebody else's composition or somebody else's image, but I want to understand as I go into the field that morning or in that evening, what I'm dealing with in terms of the conditions or possibilities that are out there so I can be prepared to respond. So yeah, that's good. So one of the questions said, how much post-processing do I use or do I do? So I start every image in Lightroom and I do all of my whites and lights, highlights and shadows, do a little bit of tone curve adjustments. And then I pull my images into Photoshop and I do Orton Effect. Or I think Orton Effect is one of the most powerful things we can do for our images to kind of soften out the transitions. It's a form of a Gaussian blur. So you're kind of going to soften out, and I talk about it in my luminosity mask class, and you're going to soften out a lot of those like harshness between the highlights and the shadows. So I always do that. And then I always do dodging and burning, excuse me. So every image can benefit from a little bit of selectively brightening and selectively darkening to help that movement all the way through. And then I do a vignette and then I'll pop it back into Lightroom and that's it. So I don't do a tremendous amount on most of my images. Most of my images are single image exposures as well. And the question invariably comes up, how much do I photograph on a tripod? Which is one of the other questions that came in. And surprisingly, I don't photograph whenever I'm backpacking or hiking off of tripods. I do photograph on tripods for early morning scenes, late evening scenes, or night scenes, or water, I should say. But I've actually been able to have good success manually stacking images very quickly and easily, photographing waterfalls. So I actually have an image from the Yellowstone trip that I'm still like, I can't believe I took 30 exposures and then aligned them and they look like a long exposure off of a tripod. So there's hope.
Question.
And then let's see, a couple more. How frequently do I bracket a scene in camera to combine in post-processing scenes with large dynamic range? Great question, John. So I don't bracket very frequently because I understand. So I shoot Nikon D810, D850, which is similar to the A7Rs or the R5s. Doesn't matter in terms of camera brand. So if you're with a camera, stay with the camera. I think all three of the major companies are doing a great job. But I understand my dynamic range and it's about 15 stops. And so I'm always protecting my highlights. And then I know what I can bring back in post-processing by opening up my shadows by local adjustments. And so I can do small local adjustments where I'm maybe opening up the shadows, but I'm protecting my sky. So I don't do a lot of exposure blending except for water. I will exposure blend with water. So I don't bracket all that frequently, and I don't do HDR. I can never get HDR to look right for me personally, so I just don't do it. So.
Hey, Nick, can you explain exposure blending in water, what that means?
Yeah, so water images, I will oftentimes, like for waves in particular, I will capture a bunch of different crashes of the waves, so to speak. And then I'll kind of go back through the post-processing and maybe I want to pull out, oh, I like this particular part over here that shows a little bit of the rock and this nice water movement here. So maybe I'll end up blending together three different exposures I took over a 5-minute period or something into that. So I'll pick part of one image and part of another image and kind of blend those together with wave or water images in particular. All right, some more. Love the Milky Way shots with post-process of the sand dune. Well, thank you, Scott. Very nice of you to say that. Yeah, it's a lot of fun to. It's a challenge, obviously, to be able to blend your images together later, and no part of it is designed to be deceptive by any stretch. But it's using our techniques. It's using techniques of how we can see. Like if we're standing out there, we can still see the sand dune oftentimes, and so using that technique really helped. Peter asked, waterfall photos in the forest. Let me actually pull up this image real quick so you can see what I'm talking about. Web JPEGs. Let me start my share again. Screen share, desktop one. Okay, so because there's a couple questions on water, which are good. All right, so this one here, everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay, so this is called, oh shoot, Iris Falls. This is on the Beckler River in Yosemite backpacking trip. So I didn't have my tripod or anything else, but it was the right time of day. I think I took this, it says 9:16 in the morning, which would have been, yeah, that'd be right. Just trying to make sure the times were right, but that was actually correct. So 9:15 in the morning, and it was a smoky day. So I'm getting lighting kind of coming down through here. And this is actually about 20 images taken handheld and then median stacked, excuse me, then aligned and then median stacked, and it's producing the same effect you'll get for long exposure. And so if I go back in and add a couple more, which I probably will, I'll be able to get it even smoother, which works all the way through. So no neutral density filter, no tripod, and I got the movement within here. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other is, because the question on the waterfalls in the forest is understanding and really watching your highlights. And so as I was capturing this image, I was making extra sure, looking at the brightest spots of the image, that I was not overexposing these parts of the image as I was capturing. And so that's always my tip I say on water, is watching your highlights or your clipping, and then making your adjustments from there. So always, and then knowing you can bring it back. So I kept this part intentionally dark, but you can see I brought back a fair amount of shadow detail as I kind of wanted all the way through.
To take the 20 shots, Nick, did you put it in like high-speed burst mode?
I didn't. So here, I'll show you what they look like. I'm going to be doing a class on this coming up because I'm pretty kind of fun. I don't know. Maybe it's, like, yeah, I could have taken my tripod with me, but I go pretty light whenever I go backpacking. So let's see. So these are the Beckler ones, and I got some more I got to put together. These are Iris Falls. So these are one of them. Nope, not these ones. Colonnade, these are the ones here. So these are what they look like. Kind of the raw, these are the raw images. Raw files. I haven't processed these, or these were the ones here. Sorry, these are the ones that are processed. And so that's what the raw image looks like, or processed image. This is what the unstacked version looks like. So we're at 9:16 and 26 seconds. And I took the last one at 9:16 and 35 seconds. So that was, I took 10 images over 10 seconds, I guess.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even that fast. I didn't have it in rapid burst mode.
And what did you use to stack the photos? What program?
Photoshop, I just pull them in there, and then you can align the images. And then I use the mean stacking method in Photoshop to stack them together.
Is that like layering, Nick? When you say-
It is like layering, so it will align the images. So an image like this works because it can Photoshop can find an area like right over here to align the image off of. And so actually I don't have it in here, but yeah, so you can, it's like it creates multiple layers and then you can align them all the way through.
So Nick, I have a question for you. I'll be up in the Smoky Mountains this weekend, and it's supposed to be raining all day, and we'll be in the forest. And of course, there's many waterfalls with no sunlight streaming in, or, maybe no light whatsoever. I am like preparing for the worst.
No,
And
I'm excited for you.
I don't know if I'll be able to take the shots of the waterfall. If it's raining, what do you do?
So shower caps.
No, I mean,
First.
not for me, but
No, for your camera though.
yeah. Oh,
And so whenever I'm in a situation or a scene with lots of water coming off of waterfalls or anything else, I'm going to have my camera under a shower cap. And you can, oftentimes you can see well enough through the clear shower cap to be able to basically frame up your composition and get ready to go. So then when you're ready to finally take the picture, you just pop the shower cap off and photograph, and then you're good, you're done. So that's one thing. The other, which I'll show you, is
No.
they're called Kimtech wipes. and you can get them on Amazon for pretty cheap. I think you can probably still see my screen. So these Kimtech wipes, they usually, like $7, and you get 280 of them.
Oh,
And these
wow.
are used for scientific equipment, and they suck up water like I've never seen anything in my entire life. And so I'll keep a box of these either in my bag or shoved inside of a coat. And then when I need to clean my lens, you'd use the Kimtech wipes. And because a lens cloth, those things don't pick up moisture. They just smear it around.
Right.
So a Kimtech wipe, if you use these, they really clean things up, which is great.
Oh, it's Kimberly Clark. Yeah, they always make some good stuff.
Yeah, but I love these things and they do a great job. So that's my thing on the waterfalls there. I mean, the biggest thing about those conditions is you're going to have that really diffuse lighting within there. So you're really going to be able to bring out a lot of the kind of the textures and the leaves and a lot of the other stuff that you'd have to be worried about blowing out.
Right.
And then a couple more questions. These are good so far, so keep them coming. Do I use neutral density filters? I do use neutral density. I'm gonna stop my share again. And then if I need to start it again, I will. I do use neutral densities I almost always use a polarizer, in part because of water reflections. And so that'd be the other thing I would say as well, is if you don't have a polarizer, definitely bring a polarizer for waterfall photos. Because you're going to be able to, you're going to oftentimes have a reflection in an area you don't really want. So you can twist. I mean, I probably know about polarizers. And then neutral densities, I do have a 10 stop for all of my lenses. And the way I use my neutral density, I don't have multiple stops, is I'll adjust my ISO and make other changes to kind of compensate for that. So if I need it to be more like a 6 stop, maybe I'll increase my ISO up a little bit, which will allow more light in. So I'll work with the 10 stop filters. The reason I can do that is I fairly reliably can photograph up to ISO 800 on any of my cameras, and I don't have noticeable noise. And so I don't have any hesitancy to go from ISO 64 up to ISO 800 to make adjustments or add more light into my images. And so that's why I only use it. I do not use grad filters. I never got into them. I tried them. I can do it in post-processing, so I don't use grads, but which is good. Next question was, the Tetons have been obscured by wildfire smoke. Yes. Do I capture any images within this unusual light situation? Well, I was really fortunate to be up there as long as I was. I was in the Glacier area for 3 weeks and then the Yellowstone area for a month. And I was watching the weather patterns and the smoke patterns very, very carefully. And so what would happen is that you could start to see weather patterns in the smoke patterns. You can get smoke forecasts up to a couple days out. And I would base my photography around that. And so if I knew it was going to be really smoky, I would do more abstracts. I would do more intimate landscapes, which was really great in Yellowstone. And then if we had clearer days with breaking clouds, then would be the days I'd go out for more of my grand landscapes, et cetera. So that was a big part, really understanding what the weather was doing and then dictating my photography based on that. Okay, yeah, it's going to be smokier today while I go out for wildlife. Oh, it's going to be nicer, et cetera. So, which is good. Jeannie asks, what kind of printer do I use? I can see it in the background. Not a good time to ask. I use a Canon Pixma Pro 100, and I can't get it to print my big prints right now. And I spent an hour on hold with Canon today and they didn't even pick up. So I'm a little peeved, but I love the printer. So I love the printer and I can print up to 13 by 19. Oh, Pixma Pro 200. Yeah, there you go. You're good to go. Yeah, it's just, it's a never ending thing to every time you update to the new systems, Big Surs or whatever else. I'm on an Apple. They don't communicate for a little while. And usually Canon is incredible customer support. I just caught them on a bad day, I guess. Hope I don't run out of ink. I do actually have a ton of ink. I stockpile ink pretty regularly. So, glad to hear. I didn't know there was a shortage. Other questions, comments, things as well? Or are we getting it well past getting closer to bedtime?
Yeah, we are on the East Coast after all.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a question. Do you use the lens correction in Lightroom?
I do. Yeah, I will always do the chromatic aberration removal. And then I will oftentimes do the lens corrections. I'll look at it and see, but most of the time, especially on my wide angle, I noticed it makes a pretty good difference to correct some of the abnormalities of the lenses. So.
Well, thank you.
So-
I'm sorry, did you have something else?
No, go ahead. I had another question come in, but if I can, the question came in on intimate landscapes. So I'll show a couple examples of those, what I'm talking about. So intimate landscapes, I teach an entire course on them. And what I call intimate landscapes are smaller subsets of the larger landscapes. And so finding scenes within scenes, essentially. So these, a lot of the ones you can see here are considered intimates. And this is probably my best example of one. So this is in Zion. And so you're in this big wide open canyon with a river and everything else, but finding within the scene what kind of is the intimate portion, or how do you story tell within that scene. So this one here, I noticed this dead tree standing out against the cottonwoods from across the valley, basically, or across the canyon. So I kind of walked over there and was kind of playing with the juxtaposition of life versus death, or regalness and death versus life. And then just how regal the sun was coming through and kind of working its way through a scene like that. So that's how I define intimate landscapes. They're not really abstracts, but they're just really kind of paring down the scenes into much smaller scenes. This would be an intimate landscape as well, like that Heart of Stone. So bringing in the bigger portions. These kind of scenes could be almost more abstract. If you don't know, if I don't tell you exactly what it is, you may not know. And so that's the key differentiator between the scenes. And then even in Yellowstone, I'll show a couple here. I'd say this was like a example of an intimate landscape with really focusing more on textures and colors oftentimes within scenes, or a scene like this one. There's another one here. So this is on the Beckler River. So focusing on color. So we had really interesting colors in the changing here. I was really drawn to the thing here. So intimate landscapes, which is good.
We're
Hey,
very
Nick.
familiar with the intimate landscapes here in Florida. We just don't have the grand vistas unless you're at the ocean, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Nick, we've had a second request here. If you could go back to, I think there means slide 2, where you had your URL codes on them.
Yeah.
So that the folks can take another snap at it. I don't know where it is, but.
Yep. Let me pull it up.
We should publish those in an email or a newsletter when it comes out.
Yeah, that would make sense too.
Yeah, they're just the same ones on there. If you just sign up for the newsletter, but it'll take it. There's the QR code. So
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
not that with the camera. You can take it with the camera.
All righty. Well, Nick, it's been it's been such a great opportunity for you to come out and talk to us lowlanders down here in Florida, where everything is flat. And as we always say to our presenters here, you're always welcome to come down, and we'll give you a cook's tour of the wildlife areas and the bird sanctuaries and the different things that are down here that are different from what you're used to shooting. So if anytime you
Yeah,
find
exactly. I
yourself
need
down
it.
here,
I was just going through some of my stuff from the trip, but I need to, I want to get down and photograph the swamp stuff at some point in time. And then,
Lots of them here.
yeah, I don't think I'm not going to go down in the middle of summer though, because I am,
well, that's
I
a
am
good.
such a sissy when it comes to heat. I'll be right straight
Ah,
across.
you want to come in alligator season, huh?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm more terrified of snakes than I am of gators, I guess. So, yeah, or maybe I'll get lucky and win some lottery and get to go up in the Blue Origins or one of the other spaceships, along with my as Richard informed me and our old friend Captain Kirk's going up, right?
Yeah, I found out that's going to be in Texas, not here.
Oh, okay.
We had a request to see my my slide where I have my my email address at the bottom there, so I just brought it up real quick. For
Yep.
those of you who want to write that down or take a picture of it, screen capture, whatever you want to do. And over the next week and a half or 2 weeks, we'll get that we'll get that all organized and we'll go out and have a good time.
Sounds great. Well, I like your group. It's a nice, Richard said, oh, they sometimes ask questions, sometimes don't. And there's nothing worse than doing a presentation and having the only question come in as what camera model do I use? And so I appreciated the interaction and the discussions ahead of time too. It was nice. You guys Richard and Gordy, you guys set a nice tone for the group. So.
Well, thank you, Nick. We appreciate
The
that.
team effort.
And it is a team effort. And we have a number of volunteers that all pitch in different ways, shapes, or forms. And we did not skip a beat other than going to Zoom when the pandemic hit. We've not missed a single meeting. We've just continued to plod along. So we've been doing really well. So we're very
Great.
happy with that, and we're very happy that folks like yourself have made yourself available to come and give presentations, because that helps out a lot. So thank you again very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you,
thanks a lot.
Nick.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Nick.
I'll be in touch with you.
All right, B. See y'all. Bye.
Bye.
See you later, Nick.
Nick.
All right. Well, as everybody is logging off, I want to thank everybody for coming and once again to the October monthly meeting. And feel free to drop us an email anytime you have comments or anything. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody on the 14th and then the 16th, and we'll try and see that rocket. The reason I picked this rocket is because this particular satellite, it's called Lucy, is going to go up, and they put all of these different astronomical geometric orbits into a computer. And if they launch this rocket at this time, they will be able to have their satellite pass 7 different asteroids. So basically, if they don't launch at 5:34 this coming the Saturday the 16th, they got to put the satellite back on the shelf for about 3,000 years before this all happens again. So
wow.
there's a really, really better than average chance that this rocket is going to go. So and it's going to be there's no solids on it, so it'll be a nice slow lift off, and it should be a very good display.
Oh, great, great.
And the Atlas is pretty reliable as far as on-time launches.
Yeah, well, yes.
Due to
it's-
weather, of course, but
Yeah, it's pretty reliable. Once you get inside of a couple weeks, it's pretty reliable. Yeah.
cool.
But
I'm there.
this particular satellite has been in the planning stages for 2 years, and they've been building the thing and integrating it. So, it's this date can't move, or they got a useless satellite, or a plan B. I don't know what their plan B is. They typically don't call me to ask what I think their plan B should be. So anyway, having said all that, what is I was just looking to see Kathy Rauback. Do you know anything about a plan B? I guess not. Okay. Kathy works up at Lockheed Martin, and they're a big part of the launch team that does ULA launches.
No, I don't know of anything.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we got our fingers crossed. We're going to go for the 16th, and hopefully make it go. So, all right, everybody. Well, thanks for joining.
One quick question.
Yes, sir.
Who judges the monthly competition photos?
It's different people every month.
Okay.
This coming month for October is Julie O'Hara. She's up in Pittsburgh. Last month, was it Roseanne?
Nancy Williamson.
Oh, yes.
Nancy from
Yeah.
the club.
And before that, it was Roseanne Hackla out in Albuquerque. So we have a number of folks that we tap from time to time, and they're all generally pretty good photographers in their own right. And so it's not like we have the same judge week in, or month in, month out. It's just we rotate it around. So, and we
Very cool. Good idea.
Yep. And Pat always reads from the riot act. I mean, the background about what they have to do as far as, following along with the theme and all that kind of stuff. So Pat does a tremendous job with that, and we'd be sunk without her. So thanks, Pat.
Good job, Pat.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that's it, everybody. Thanks for coming in, and thanks for enjoying another Camera Club of Brevard meeting. We'll see you later.
All
Thank
right.
you, Gordy.
Thanks,
Good
everybody.
night.
Bye, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.